Gary, thanks for so much for doing this. A friend wanted to get into this just for emergencies, but didn't want to get a full ham license. And I started researching it. I go, well, I'm game. And so I got this little guy from HRO. It's a fun little solid radio and to help them get at least their basic one set up. And I thought this would be a great time to get the great Gary to go over some fundamental questions because you're always so generous in helping in groups. And I go into this North Carolina GMRS group and find some of the best answers. There are many good people there. Came from someone I knew. So
boom, there I am. I'm everywhere.
You're everywhere. Yeah. So your cloning is working well. So I thought this would be about for people who might be thinking about it to get into it, but also hams that go, hey, maybe this is something I also want to get in, especially if you want to get family members who aren't as techy having some type of backup emergency communications.
Yeah, that's perfect. I do this. Where's the sign? This Ham Radio Now YouTube show. Yep. And a previous episode was called GMRS is the new novice for ham radio. Ham radio used to have an entry-level license called novice. It's been gone for a long time. But GMRS is a great entry to get into ham radio or just do GMRS. You don't have to go to ham radio. But it's a good first step.
Well, let's start with just what is it? Because we've got GMRS and then we've got FRS. And then, of course, we still have some people using Citizen Band. When I talk to truckers, often they'll do that. Well, they'll say they'll turn it on where they're going in to unload something or docking or something like that. So there's still a world of that as well. And I thought this would be good to do a contrast against these to start.
Okay, well, they're all radio services. And GMRS is the initials stand for General Mobile Radio Service, which tells you nothing. It's not exactly a hobby, but you can use it as a hobby. It's not exactly for business, but you can use it for business. It is 22 channels of two-way radio in the UHF radio spectrum, which is more or less line of sight. I can see you, I can talk to you on the radio. It is obviously a little farther than that. Mm-hmm. And it's a licensed radio service. You can get a license without taking a test. There's no test. It's $35 for 10 years and get a radio and talk to anybody else who has a GMRS license. So when I say it can be a hobby, in the past couple of years, the hobby aspect of it has been growing. But not everybody who gets into it wants to play as a hobby. Some people will use it for their family. Back in the old days, if you owned a business, you could get a GMRS license for your business. These days, you can't do that anymore. They don't want it to be a business band set of channels anymore. There may be a few businesses that are left, but if you've got a GMRS license, you're free to conduct business using your license. So, but if you had, say, a business with 25 employees and you wanted everybody to have radios and you wanted to talk to them, each one of those 25 people would then have to get a GMRS license. Mm-hmm. You're better off going to some business radio service to do something like that, assuming you even need the coverage that you'd get from a higher power radio system. If all you're doing is covering your store, then an unlicensed FRS radio like this will do the job. If like a grocery store, plenty of coverage for that, and nobody needs a license, and the radios are cheap.
Yeah, and their I think maximum power is like 2.5 watts or something. It's a little
2 watts even.
Yeah. 2 watts even. Okay, 2 watts even. Yeah, excellent. And they're a subset of all the ones that you get with the GMRS as well.
Yeah, this is a confusing thing. I had said that there's 22 channels in GMRS, which is true. There's 22 channels in FRS, and those initials are Family Radio Service. They're the same 22 channels. They overlay each other completely. Right. GMRS has one additional thing about it. Well, it's got a few other things, additional things about it, but one main thing. GMRS has something called repeaters. And as I said, with radios like this, you can talk line of sight, which means a couple of miles between two radios like this, which may do all the coverage that you need. But if it doesn't, there's devices called repeaters. And once again, as I say, there's a line of sight. So the higher you get, if you can get up on top of a tall building or climb a hill, you can talk farther. Well, that's not always convenient. So, not always a tall building or a tower to climb when you need one to talk a little bit farther. So we put these devices called repeaters. It's a box that's got a receiver in it, a transmitter. The receiver receives a signal, feeds the audio to the transmitter, retransmits it. You put that up as high as you can get it. A couple hundred feet would be great. Top of a 20-story building or a tower, or if you've got a mountain nearby. And that gives you much greater coverage. So it receives your signal from this little thing on the ground, way up on the tower, retransmits you to other people with their radios on the ground. And now instead of a couple of miles, you've got maybe 10, 15, 20 miles in a circle, a radius around that repeater. And so GMRS has repeaters on the top 8 channels. Channels 15 through 22 allow GMRS repeaters. If you put this radio on channel 15, you've got some possibility of hearing a GMRS repeater on it. Even though this is an FRS radio, because once again, they share all those frequencies. So the GMRS has the top 8 channels are for repeaters. And since the receiver on the repeater has to be a different frequency than the transmitter, GMRS gets 8 more channels. Those become what they call the repeater input frequencies. If I'm going too fast for anybody, just raise your hand and I'll stop.
Right. Well, I want to take that because that's pretty confusing, because if you get the radio and you look up on the site, it just gives one of those frequencies. And so, on a repeater, you've got the frequency and then another frequency, but it doesn't always say that on the repeater page. So you have to kind of already know that, or have read probably the text that's on the site as well.
Yeah, you can find some charts on the web to just tell you what's what. Another thing about GMRS, there's going to be many things about GMRS, so take notes, and there's going to be a quiz later on. Another thing about GMRS is that a lot of the people that use it, especially the people that use it more as a hobby, more to play with, they don't talk about channel numbers. They talk about the actual radio frequency that corresponds to the channel number. And some of them will get a little peeved at you if you say, I'm on channel 18. Well, what frequency is that? I don't know. My radio says channel 18. Yeah, you can find a chart, and I have tried hard to memorize what the frequencies are and what the channel numbers are. My brain won't accept it. I can't do it.
Well, and not only that, most of these radios will let you redefine those numbers.
Yeah.
I just got this and I thought, well, I've got to pick something to put the repeater frequency on. So I picked like the first few channels that were on it. So, that makes it more confusing, because it's got numbers, but they don't have to be assigned to a specific frequency as long as they're within the legal individual frequencies that you can use.
Yeah, but you're better off sticking with the channel numbers that are conventionally used, so that when you're talking to somebody else about what frequency or what channel you want to meet them on, you got a chance of doing that. How many channels does that radio let you operate on?
This one has 15.
All right, so it's a pretty limited radio.
Right.
Most of the others out
there. Simple, more tough little radio. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's you can set that up so it's going to work in your local area.
Yeah.
But if you go to the next town over, there's a chance it's not going to work on the repeaters in that town, because you don't have them programmed into that radio, or you don't have some of the parameters needed to access that repeater. So I wouldn't recommend a radio like that unless you have a specific place you're going to use it in, and not planning on traveling with it. to talk to other people. And now if you got two of those radios and you're using it within your family, you can go anywhere and use it.
Real simple. Right. Right. So we've got the, along with the different frequencies that are being used, and like you said, the people who are using it more as a hobby are referring to the frequencies. We also have these other features, and I think of them as tones, and talk about that because there's a whole series. You need to know the repeater frequency and then the tone. And that's another to someone starting out. That's a whole nother level of complexity.
Yeah, because this stuff, this is all Klingon to somebody who's never had experience with two-way radio stuff. So do expect it's going to take a while to understand what all this is, but also do expect that you're going to need to understand it at least to some extent. So while we say there's no test, oh, there's a test. It's just not one you have to pass to get an FCC license, but to make these things work, to get on the air and make things work, you got to learn some stuff. So that's your test. Before I talk about the tones, let me give a real world example because I said, well, I don't remember the frequencies and the channel numbers, but I remember some of them. For example, channel 15, the radio frequency for that is 462.55 megahertz. So 462.55 megahertz is channel 15 in both FRS and GMRS. And the input for the repeater, if you're talking about a repeater on channel 15, and channel 15 is the lowest channel you can put a repeater on. The input is 467.55. So 5 megahertz up from the output frequency. That's the input frequency. The input for all GMRS repeaters is 5 megahertz up. So let's see. Channel 15, 462.55. Channel 22, the highest channel, is 462.725 megahertz. And everything else goes in between those two.
So if someone had one which just had limited numbers like this, then you're going to have to take some of these, those maybe the first few channels and reassign them to those repeaters near you.
Yeah. So you must have programmed that using some computer software.
Yep.
Because there's no
they have a
buttons on the
cable
front.
and they have a download, and you just it's a little table and you click this little button and it pulls everything off the radio, change them around, and pushes it onto the radio. That's it.
Yeah. And then you looked up probably from one of the websites that there are 2 main repeaters in your town, Raleigh, North Carolina, right now. 2 primary repeaters and a couple others that look like they're going to be coming on the air fairly soon. There's one a little bit out of town in the next county over in Alamance County, 2 counties over. This is all North Carolina. Is our audience worldwide here?
Yes,
okay.
It is.
Okay, for one thing, if the audience is worldwide, if you're outside the U.S., forget it.
Right.
This does not exist outside the U.S.
Right. That's good to get them too. Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about North Carolina. Martin lives in the Raleigh, North Carolina area. I used to live there. That's where we met. And there's two repeaters that cover most of the city, and then one over in Alamance County, probably about 40 miles away from you, maybe 35, 40 miles away. It would be dicey to work that repeater on a handheld, but with a mobile radio, it covers into Raleigh on the higher spots. Again, this is line of sight. The higher you get, the better you are. You go down into a little valley, you're shielded from that repeater. You probably can't talk to it. But if you're up on a high spot, even with a handheld, maybe you can. So that's, those are things you got to sort of figure out. There's a website that can help you find what GMRS repeaters are in your area. It's called mygmrs.com, mygmrs.com. I think you need a GMRS license to be able to use it, because when you register for it, they say, what's your call sign? And I don't think it give you an option to say, I don't have one. So,
well, it does give you a lot of information without signing in, because I looked it up before I got the call sign. So there's, they want to at least help people out to get into the hobby, I think, as well.
Yeah. So
But
you
you're
can,
right. It does want it. In fact, the Facebook group, the North Carolina group, it asks when what is your call sign for it. And I don't know, you might say, I don't know what would happen if you put in, I'm applying for it now or not. I haven't tested that, but it
well, as
does
a
want you to have
Facebook
one.
group, just somebody looking at it to say, does this person really want to be in our group, or are they just,
Yeah,
are they a bot or something?
right.
So if you say,
Exactly.
license applied for, I think that's all you need to get in. There's a bunch of Facebook groups. There's some national Facebook groups for GMRS, and almost every area where there is GMRS activity, there's going to be a Facebook group for those local folks, if not more than one. That's another interesting point. Is that the hobby aspect of GMRS? Well, first of all, it's mostly going to be repeater oriented, because those are, in addition to being devices that can extend the range of these radios, they're also community gathering spots. People get together on those repeaters because they can all talk to each other in that extended range. So they become, community watering holes. Everybody gets together. Not every region of the country has a GMRS repeater yet. It's pretty new phenomenon. It's been around for a long time, but the hobby aspect's pretty new. So there's lots of places around the country that either don't have a GMRS repeater, or people are just starting to put them up. And again, not everybody uses it for hobby. Some people use it just for their family. Some people may have a farm or some other area where they need radio coverage over a good distance, and they can use GMRS for that. I said you can't use it for your business. So if you've got a farm and you have employees that are not family members, then they would all have to get GMRS licenses. It's $35 for 10 years. It's not that big a deal. But a cool thing about a GMRS license is that it covers your family. And by family, the FCC is really generous. It's your very extended family. Obviously, mom and dad, and the kids, and grandma and grandpa, and great grandma and great grandpa, and grandkids, and uncles and aunts and cousins. I think that's the limit. I think, if you had a third cousin twice removed, no, sorry, you don't get to use that GMRS license.
Yeah.
But lots of other people in your family do. And if for somebody who's a ham who's looking at this idea, a ham has two identities. They got their name and they got their call sign. You're KI4CFS. I'm K4AAQ. With GMRS, you only get one call sign and it gets shared by everybody. And that blows a ham's mind. They'll say, well, how do you do that? When you give that call sign, everybody gives the same call sign. Yeah, there's going to be 4 people on the air giving the same call sign if you got 4 family members with radios. That's GMRS. It's different. It works that way. Well, you can assign unit numbers, unit 1 calling unit 3.
Exactly. I actually got through and had some great talks with some people in the FCC and getting my license. I thought I'd talk to them and ask, and I was excited. I have to tell them,
you have no shame at all. You'll talk to
their
anybody.
website needs Radio Shack from the 80s to come on and say, come back to the 80s and restart it, because you don't even know how I could design a website more arduous to use in my entire lifetime.
But it worked. You got your license.
Yeah, but I got the license. But, I think from the perspective of customer service, and so I do want to tell people it's going to be a little bit of a challenge if you aren't technical, but there are the recipes. The FCC does have a list. You're going to sign up, and then you're going to do something where you get a number, and then then you'll pay, then you're signed out and you have to sign back in to pay. And then you give it a few days, and then you need to turn around 3 times and wave your hands, and then it shows up, and then you're done for 10 years. So, fair enough. It is, just warn people. It's a few hoops. I did go through it with somebody, and they were going, how could it be this hard?
Wait till you get a little bit older and try to sign up for Medicare.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Getting a GMRS license was a piece of cake.
In contrast, to be fair. But I just want people to know. but there's also, I mean, the group was helpful to give me some information, direct me. But I called the FCC and talked to them. I said I just had some questions about it, and they were great about saying
you got a human being to talk to.
I actually got through to a human
being.
This
is the FCC. Thank you. What is your question?
No, I want to say it was easier to reach a human being than it was to get through the website, which is shocking with the government, and they were very nice people. And I asked them some questions like, okay, so, my wife can use it because I'm a ham. I had the same thing. It said yes. And you could put letters after it. So you could be, WRYGH10 MB, and then my wife is Barbara Brossman, so BB or something like that. And I repeat it, and they go, "Yep, you can do that."
Yeah, the rules actually use the words Unit 1, Unit 2, but that's not mandatory. You can make it, or you don't have to do any at all. You can just say Martin to Barbara, come in, WRYG 682.
Yeah. That's great. And then I also asked about the etiquette, which were, the rules for identifying yourself. And that was interesting, at least what I heard. And Gary, you're really good on the details on it, is you're to give it every 15 minutes at the end of the transmission. They didn't. Now, I'm still going to give it at the beginning, but the two people I asked said at the end of transmission, but I'm too trained at identifying myself first. I just don't want to give that up.
Ham radio has been that way for a long time too. As a ham, you don't have to give your call sign when you first come on the air. You have to identify. The ham radio limit is shorter. It's 10 minutes.
Right.
But you can talk for 9 minutes and 59 seconds without giving a call sign. You're going to be hard put to find any hams who will talk to you that long until you give a call sign.
That's right.
But legally, you don't have to.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's more habit that's developed on it. Yeah. So that's.
I mean, when I was licensed in 1965, and for a couple of decades after that, you had to give your call sign at the beginning and the end, and then somehow that changed, and nobody knows why. They didn't explain it to us. They didn't say, we really don't need to know who you are for 10 minutes. That's okay. It just changed one day, and we all said, fine, we're going to do what we always did.
Yeah. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But, that's the identifier as well. And I did tell the person, if you hear people say Roger or things like that, you don't have to do it. and anything like that is needed. But just
a little ham language has crept into GMRS, not very much CB. You won't hear, at least the areas that I've been in, you don't hear 10 codes. You don't hear very much of the CB type language, like "come on back, how about it?"
Yeah,
it's very much just plain English. And a few people will use some of the ham language, like 73, best regards. So if you're a ham, well, first of all, if you're a ham and your operating voice, let's cool it with all the special words and codes and stuff. You don't need any of that stuff as a ham either.
Yeah.
Maybe 73 at the end.
Yeah.
I'm pulling up to the QTH where they're getting a little bit of QRM here at the QTH. Is that a QSL?
Yeah.
Don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Helpful more in Morse code than English, right?
Yeah. And on GMRS, you don't need to do that either. You don't need to learn any of that stuff. Just talk as if you're a human being.
Oh my gosh. I think I might be able to do that. So the important thing to note is we've got a frequency, which is generally the receiving frequency when we talk to repeaters, or the simplex frequency, talking peer to peer. And then we have some other numbers that can be there. We have one that's related to receiving and one related to transmit. And that's talk a little bit more about that, because there's several different sets of it. In fact, I had forgotten one. I think you helped me out. I go, I can't find this one here. And you go, it's there. And I found it. So, and then of course on this radio, it had low power, high power. So that was interesting. So you could, I guess set it for low power on some, it had preset, and then high power on others. And then there was a wide and narrow. I just left it on default wide.
Yep. GMRS repeaters are wide almost every place. To explain that as briefly as I can. 45 minutes later, I'll get back to the tone thing. These radios operate on something called FM, frequency modulation. if you're totally non-radio person, you've listened to FM broadcast stations. And what that means is you've got a specific frequency that the radio station is transmitting on, or that this little walkie-talkie is transmitting on. And when you put voice into it, it actually moves that frequency up and down in correlation to the loudness of your voice and the pitch of your voice. That's what frequency modulation is all about. And so the radio is designed to say, I'm talking at a certain volume, and the radio gets a little bit of radio spectrum. Everybody's sharing the radio spectrum. The radio gets a little bit of radio spectrum, and say you get this much.
Mhm.
And so we develop channels, and knowing that one amount of voice, one amount of radio is going to use this much radio spectrum, then we put the next channel that much farther over, and the next channel is that much farther over, until we run out of channels,
Mhm.
which we did about, I don't know, 20 years ago.
Mhm.
And so the FCC and the engineers said, you know what we can do? We can take this channel and we can squeeze things together and make it only this wide instead of this wide. And so now we got a channel here and a channel here and a channel here, and we doubled the number of available channels. Well, the wide thing on these radios is the channel that's this wide. And the narrow thing is the channel that's this wide. And it's confusing in GMRS because you're allowed to use either one.
Mm.
FRS is only allowed to use narrow. So this radio is narrow on all 22 channels because it's an FRS radio. GMRS radio can be either. And, I didn't mention that we share those 22 channels at GMRS and FRS. It is completely legal for a licensed $35 for 10 years, and you get a call sign and everything, GMRS station, to talk to somebody who's on one of these FRS radios with no call sign and no license, and just got the radio and from Walmart or wherever. You can talk to them. If you try, you're going to confuse the hell out of them. Because they're not using it for a hobby. They're using it to, to talk to the kids or the spouse, or maybe somebody else in the store or something. And they think they're the only people there.
Mm-hmm.
And to have another voice come in and say, hi there, just wanted to say hi. How you doing? My name's Gary. How you doing? Just wanted to say hello. They'll go, get off my channel. What are you doing on here? This is my channel. They'll be totally confused. But it's still legal. And we share the space. Okay, let's talk about the tones.
I know. Do it. I did tell you a headache time ago. Somebody was on one of the channels with the that a large department store, we won't say, was on, and someone came on and said, the kid, really, this is the last bicycle, it's Christmas, can we sell it? And someone came on that wasn't in the store and said, I approve it, just assume it's approved. And they went, oh, you are so great. So I would recommend that behavior, but I just remembered it.
It can be fun.
Yeah.
If you know what you're doing. What you're doing. Yeah. I'll hear kids. What I'm about to explain is probably illegal. Mm-hmm. So I will say that I did it like 30 years ago, even though FRS wasn't around then. So just to make sure the statute of limitations has run out. I'll hear a couple of kids like yelling and screaming at each other, because that's what you hear on FRS. It's kids going, and pushing the buttons, go, beetle, beetle, beetle. And I'll come on and say, this is the FCC. Your operation is completely illegal, and you must terminate immediately. Hand the radio back to your parents.
That's funny. That's funny.
It goes silent. It goes silent. Kids stop yelling. They probably run, Mommy, my radio told me to stop.
That's it. Now we'll get to the tones.
So 22 channels. Is that enough?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these things, you got a mile, maybe 2 miles.
Yeah.
Are there more than 22 other people that want to be talking on the radio at the same time within your mile or 2 miles? Probably not. These things are not very popular. They had a spike of popularity for a while, and then cell phones came out. Mm-hmm. And so You don't need these much anymore. But there is a reason for wanting to create a bit more. I'm going to use the word privacy, but it's not really privacy, because you'll see these listed as privacy tones. They're not privacy tones, because anybody can still hear you. What they are is a mechanism that you can configure your radio so that if there is somebody else talking on the channel that you want to listen to, but are not actively listening and not actively using, you're not going to hear them. And so you and your wife are talking on channel 7. Me and my wife use channel 7, but we don't want to talk to you and we don't want to hear what you're talking about. We want our radios to stay silent. So there's something you can configure the radios to do so that it doesn't hear anybody except for the people that you want to hear it. And that's what those privacy tones are. Once again, privacy is a bad word for it, because anybody can hear you. It's just you're not going to hear other people. Here's what they are. You add a low frequency, low pitched, continuous tone to the transmitter. Think of it as somebody sitting behind you playing a clarinet, going low pitched as they can get. On the other end, you got a circuit in the receiver that says, well, I'm hearing the radio signal from some guy. Now I want to see if he's got the guy playing the clarinet with playing B flat. Because if they're playing C sharp, I'm not going to hear them. But if they're playing B flat, because he says make it B flat, I'm going to open the speaker and play that sound. And that's the way it works. That low pitched tone you assign for your transmitter, and then set up the receiver of the person that you want to talk to, so that they say, okay, I want to hear that tone. And if I don't hear that tone and no others, I'm going to stay silent. So you and your wife, you'll use tone A, and me and my wife will use tone C. Well, they're not numbered or lettered like that, but just to make it simple. And so with you transmitting tone A, my radio with listening for tone C is not going to hear you, even though we're on the same channel, even though we're within range. You're a quarter mile down the road from me. These repeater things that I was mentioning, they're, way up on a tall building or tall tower. They can hear signals all over the place. And the radio spectrum it's a nasty place. There's interference. There's junk. There's garbage. There's noise everywhere. There didn't used to be noise everywhere. There only used to be a little bit of noise. But with the advent of all of these computers and electronic circuits and bad little wall wart power supplies, all that stuff makes radio junk. And we need something to keep that radio junk out of our receivers. And if you put a receiver up on a 300-foot tower, it's going to hear a lot of junk. Mm-hmm. So we put that tone access thing on those repeaters so that they only hear the signals that are intended for that repeater, and they don't hear the junk.
Yeah, and so that means that if I wanted to connect to a repeater, I want to know the frequencies to use. And of course, you need to know when you read it, it only shows the receive frequency. For someone new, it doesn't say the send frequency. So you got to know that. And you also you'll see the tone that's mentioned, and you need to put that in, I guess, receive and send, right? For that transmitter.
You'll need to at least put it in. If you've got the option to put it in your transmitter and your receiver, you can do both, but you need to at least put it in your transmitter.
Yeah.
So that as you transmit a signal to the repeater, the repeater hears you and responds to both your signal and the presence of that tone. Now, real world stuff, those tones I'm talking about start, the lowest one is 67 hertz or 67 cycles, and the highest one is 256. Mm-hmm. And there's 50 of them scattered up in there. They're usually about 3 to 4 hertz or cycles per second apart. So 67, then 70 point something, and they're very selective. They're very fine tuned, and so they're listed down to a tenth of a cycle per second. So, for example, a common tone is 88.5 cycles per second.
Mm-hmm.
And we call them subaudible tones. You'll see them referred to by several names. CTCSS is the official generic name, continuous tone coded squelch system. Also called subaudible tone, and also called by a Motorola trade name that started back in the 50s, PL, or private line. Maybe that's where that word private came from.
Mm-hmm.
Bad word. It's not private at all. And so there's 50 of those tones, and so you can select whichever one you need to access the repeater. So when you're setting up your radio to communicate through a repeater, you got to know the repeater exists. You got to know which frequency it's on or which channel number it's on. The input is always going to be 5 megahertz above the output. So the frequency you put into your radio is what's called the repeater output frequency, or the frequency you're going to receive. You always know you need to transmit up 5 megahertz from that. We call that the offset, 5 megahertz offset. That's standard everywhere on GMRS repeaters. So you need the receive frequency, you'll know the offset, and you'll need the tone. All that stuff for publicly available repeaters is published. So you see that and you plug it in. You can put in that same tone for your receiver if you want to keep your receiver from hearing that junk that's floating around us all the time in the radio environment.
Mm-hmm.
There's some other uses for that tone. We only have 8 repeater frequencies in GMRS.
Mm-hmm.
And more and more GMRS repeaters are coming on the air. And so say you live in Raleigh. Right now, there's only 2 GMRS repeaters, 2 big ones in your area, and a couple in the territory around you, sort of within radio range. But sooner or later, more of those frequencies are be in use. And you will have some GMRS repeaters that are a little bit distant from you, but not so far that you can't hit it, especially with a mobile radio. But you only want to talk through your local repeater. You don't want to talk through the one in the next town over. So the one in the next town over will have a different tone than your local repeater.
And that's so right. So they don't, and that's similar if you're an amateur radio,
Yeah, very much.
88 going to DC. There's an 88 in DC on a different tone, an 88. I think there's one in Western North Carolina, Richmond. Yeah. And so forth. So
there's one down here just west of Charlotte. I live in the Charlotte area. So all these frequencies get reused, and on GMRS it's even worse because the hams have literally hundreds of frequencies they can use for repeaters. GMRS has 8. Count them, 8.
8. That's it. Yeah. And in the amateur radio, in a lot of our frequencies, we don't just have discrete channels. Well, this has discrete frequency channels.
Yeah.
So that's
in the amateur world of FM and repeaters, yes, we do have discrete channels.
Right.
But we made them up. We decided which ones they would be. We're not, the FCC doesn't say you must use these specific frequencies for repeaters. We can put them any place, but to make things work, we decided a long time ago, back in the 60s and 70s, let's set up a system where we're all going to use this common set of frequencies that we will publish, and everybody putting up repeaters will stick to that. And for the most part, that has worked. But on GMRS, it's the FCC that said these are the 8 channels, a subset of the 22 total channels, and that's all you got. I'm kind of wondering if it's going to last. Or if the FCC, if the pressure will be on the FCC to give the GMRS a little more spectrum someday.
I don't know. I'm voting for an upgraded website first.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
I'll count on it. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
They got hacked a while ago, earlier this year.
Did they really?
There was a one of those ransomware things got a lot of the federal government, and the FCC's website was down for over a week.
Mm.
And I'm not sure if they paid the ransom. Nobody's saying, but
I do know when I
somebody
signed
does.
up, I talked to them and they said, yep, you're going to click the button and then you're going to have to go get coffee.
Yeah, might take a bit.
I mean, this is for, and they were real nice too. They're like, and if it doesn't come back or gives an error, you just need to wait a while and try another time. I just have to say, I was so pleased. It's very seldom you get to say, just really nice people I got to talk to at FCC
Yeah.
and helpful.
And they probably answer the same question 50 times a day.
Yeah, but they were nice about it. Not, and it was wonderful. And apparently they're up in, I think, Hagersburg or something. I don't know. Gaithersburg, I think they said. Anyway,
Gettysburg, I think.
Gettysburg. That's it.
Yeah.
Gettysburg.
Yeah, the big FCC office in Gettysburg.
Yeah, it was really cool. I love the area. Another thing I'd like to talk about is, okay, so the first step someone does if they wants to get into this, it's not a ham, is go to find the instructions on one of these sites of how to start getting your license. I say look for some people in it, read something on it, and just know there are going to be a bunch of little steps you have to go through to get it. But follow through it, be persistent, and you'll get a FRN number, and that's like identifying you to the FCC, and then you'll pay for your license, and within a day or two, it shows up. Am I on the page you understand?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's 24 to 48 hours, pretty typically.
It was pretty fast with us. So
yeah, you have a couple of options, and I picked the wrong one when you go to pay for it. You can do it with a credit card, and there'll be a small fee, a couple of bucks, or you can do a bank transfer. And I picked the bank transfer, and that wasn't going to happen on a weekend, and I did it on a Friday. So I had to wait until Monday until it went through. If you use a credit card, it'll go through anytime, weekends, whatever, doesn't matter. That FRN, what does that stand for? Federal Resource Number?
Gosh, I do not know.
That is something you get to deal with the FCC, and it is pretty much an individual thing, but it covers any of your activity with the FCC. So my activity with the FCC is my ham license and my GMRS license, but they both are there under the same FRN. So when I went to get the GMRS license, it said, what's your FRN? And I just filled that out. FRNs are not private. I can find out what yours is. You can find out what mine is. And you need also to set up an account on the FCC website with a login and password and stuff. All of that is common between all of your dealings with the FCC as well. So the login I used for my ham license is the same login I used to get my GMRS license. But if you don't already have a ham license, then you're going to be doing all this stuff from scratch. If you do it for GMRS and then eventually say, I like this radio thing, but I want more, I want to expand my horizons, and I want to get a ham license, then you're all set with your FRN and your login, and you can then use that as you go through the steps of getting your ham license.
Right. In the ham license, you need to pass the test first, then you'll go there. But you want to use that same FRN because it's nice, because I go on, sign in, and it's got my ham license and it's got my this license as well, my GMRS license, all together on the FCC. So that's the first thing. Then after you get it, let's talk about getting a radio, and there's so many options out there. I did choose this. I do want to say,
you made a big mistake. So let's admit that.
You need to talk to HRO. They're supposed to be supporting the hobby. I said I wanted something simple and durable for a newbie that was just sent up and work, and it was the one they recommended.
Yeah, so, and they're not wrong.
And they, where it turns on and works. And I wanted to make sure I had at least the one that was helping out my friend in getting. And I got to tell you, it's solid. It's, for a ham, I'd want more features, but it's like a little bit over $100, and they're good to go, and it's stable. And
I'm surprised it was that expensive, but it's probably a very high quality radio, because the more the more capable radios, the ones with many more features, are not going to be that much more expensive, and some of them will be less.
Right.
What that radio won't do is, first of all, you don't get all 22 channels.
Right. Right.
And it probably doesn't even have the capability of talking direct or simplex on any channels you haven't programmed for that. So if you wanted to put in all 8 repeater channels and a few more simplex channels, you'd have to pick and choose among the 22 that are available. 22 as simplex, and then essentially 8 more, even though they're kind of overlaid as repeater channels. You'd have to pick and choose what to stuff into that radio.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you travel around or meet other people and do stuff, they'd have to use their radios to accommodate you, because you can make no changes
Mm-hmm.
to that radio other than hauling your laptop around and going into it and setting some things up differently. So most of the radios out there will be much more flexible.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have all 22 channels and the 8 repeater channels and the ability to go in and set the tones and change the tones
Mm-hmm.
and do what you need to operate flexibly on all those frequencies. So what radios are there? I am not an expert in all the radios that are out there. I know
Mm-hmm.
a few of the manufacturers, a few of the brands.
Mm-hmm.
Midland has been around forever. My first Midland radios were CB walkie-talkies back in the 1960s as a company. And I don't think it's one of those situations where somewhere in the middle they went out of business and somebody else bought the brand. I think it's continuously been the same company, Japanese company. And they're one of the more popular radios brands. They make mobile radios fully set up for GMRS. They make a bunch of handheld radios, and I'm not sure that their handheld radios are fully GMRS compatible. I think they may be just FRS. I'm not an expert. I'm not positive about that.
Mm-hmm.
A Chinese company, which is pronounced Ocean, but is spelled Woxon, Wouxon, is also a high quality manufacturer. They make ham radios, they make commercial radios, and they make GMRS radios. And so if you buy one of their GMRS radios, it's going to be flexible. They have several handheld models and several mobile models. It's a brand I would recommend. There's a brand called BTech, BTECH. And they make, again, handheld and GMRS radios. And I've got a few of their ham radios. And it's the cheaper side of the ham radio market, but they work.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer the more expensive Japanese radios from ICOM, Yaesu, and Kenwood.
Mm-hmm.
But the BTech radios work okay.
And then go ahead.
I was trying to remember if I had another radio brand. There's a company called Radio Oddity. There's a company called Rugged Radios. Some of those are rebranded or maybe somewhat modified radios from other manufacturers. The Chinese have just proliferated like crazy in making brands and models and names and then rebranding. And it's confusing and hard to keep track of.
Yeah. So it looks, so, what I would say is find out where the local group is, maybe ask what they're using there, because there's a chance of getting help,
Yeah.
It's just like, if you go in a club and the club nearest you loves ICOM versus Yaesu, get an ICOM, it's where can you get local help is one variable I give.
On those Facebook groups, probably the first or second most asked question is, recommend me a radio. What's the best GMRS radio that I can buy?
Right.
Okay, what's the second best? Because the first best is $300.
Right.
And I had more like $85 in mind. But you'll see that question is asked over and over and over again, and the answers are similar. Somewhere between that Ocean, Woxon, and Midland. If all you want to do is go find a radio, you won't go wrong in getting one of those radios. You'll do fine.
Right.
Now,
that sounds great.
There's complexity.
Uh-huh.
Well, first of all, we talked about handheld radios.
Yeah.
And we talked about mobile radio. So what's the difference?
Yeah.
So the handheld radio, something like this.
Right.
This is not a GMRS radio. This is a ham radio.
Mm-hmm.
But something like this handheld radio, short antenna,
Mm-hmm.
puts out 4 or 5 watts,
Mm-hmm.
and talking through direct radio to radio a few miles, unless you climb up on top of the tower or the mountain, and then just go quite a bit farther. But for most of us standing on the ground, on the earth, with either flat terrain or gently rolling hills, we're talking a couple of miles. So if that's going to do the job, or go through a repeater and go a few more miles, then you're all set. But if you're driving around in your car, operating one of these in your car is not the most convenient. And if you're inside the car with this antenna, you are sitting in a shielded box.
Right.
And the radio signal is going to have a hard time getting out of the car. Some signal will leak through the windows, but as soon as you step from outside the car to inside the car, you cut your range in half or worse. So more convenient to have a mobile radio mounted under the dashboard. Okay, we don't have dashboards anymore. Mm-hmm. You can tell how old I am. Mounted somewhere where you can stuff it in, and an antenna on the roof or the back of the trunk. Antenna in the middle of the roof is best. Best is a problem for most people. Have you drilled any holes in your car?
Yeah, I know. Mine are on the trunk.
Yeah, on a
fish around on the trunk, clip on the trunk. Yeah,
you didn't drill a hole.
No, I did.
Yeah, my car has 5 holes drilled in the roof, 2 more in the cowl.
And how many are leaking?
It's none. And that's from 2007 when I bought that car.
You did it right.
I had them installed by a local 2-way radio place.
Yeah.
So none of them leaked. One failed. One of the 7 failed, and I had to replace the mount. Mm-hmm. Wasn't that hard to do. In what is it, 13 years or so since 2007? Not bad. Not bad. I can't sell that car. I put too much work in it, putting radios in. It's 225,000 miles in a Toyota RAV4. A mobile radio, first of all, if you want maximum distance and maximum convenience when you're driving around, get a mobile radio. You might want a radio in your house as well. Mm-hmm. Nobody makes what we call a base station radio. Nobody makes something designed to sit on a shelf and be a house-operated radio. They're all mobile radios. They're all designed to operate off 13.8 volts. You get a power supply.
I see it.
Yeah.
It looks like a Radio Shack one.
It is, and you won't get that power supply because that's too wimpy. That power supply is down below where you can see. You'll need a supply that can produce 15 to 20 amps
that's good
for a full mobile radio.
No.
We didn't mention the power levels. We talked about 2 watts for FRS, 5 watts. Well, 5. This gets complicated. If you got a GMRS license across those 22 channels, some of them you're limited to 5 watts. Some of them you're limited to a half a watt, and some of them, the repeater channels, you can run 50 watts, 50 freaking watts. Yeah, I'm the 50 watt blowtorch from Charlotte, North Carolina. But a 50 watt radio, first of all, a lot more coverage, talking either radio to radio or to the repeaters, way better than 5 watts, way better than 2 watts or a half a watt. But it's going to draw more current. And if you're using it as a base station radio, it's going to draw about 12 amps. And you want some headroom. You want some excess. So you'll want a power supply that's at least good for 15. I would prefer 20 amps.
Mm-hmm.
That's a beefy power supply. I got one up there. I'm not willing to pull it down.
Yeah, it's all right.
It's all wired in, and it's heavy. But you can set one up in your house and an antenna up on the roof. So in your car, 50 watt radio, they make other models that are only 25 watts or 20 watts, 15 watts. There's a few like that. Is there a big difference? Is there a really big difference between 15 watts and 50 watts? as long as you got the antenna outside the car, up on the roof, or maybe back on the deck. It's a noticeable difference, but it's not huge. It's not like you're going to go from 10 miles of coverage to 50 miles. You're going to go from 10 miles of coverage to 15 miles at best as a difference. So don't worry too much about that 50 watts. If what you can do is a 25-watt radio, that can be that big a difference. So you got to decide, do you want a mobile radio or do you want a handheld radio? And of course, if you're like Martin and me, you're going to get both.
Right. Well,
and one in the house.
I'm going to say, I still think a handheld first, you're always going to use it. That's my view. And then, but you will probably need to get a better antenna.
Yeah, you got the extended
default little bitty antenna that came with it. So, that's the piece to understand. And if you're in the Raleigh area, I found that North Carolina group quite helpful so far. They seem to be a good group. You're in there, some others helping out. So,
have you talked to very many people on, probably the repeater you're using is the Fairgrounds repeater?
That's it. And then I was over at First Watch, which is on Glenwood Avenue, meeting with my assistant today, and was able to get on another one.
I had brunch there just the other day.
All right. We'll have to meet sometime. But, I did meet there and was able to get on another one. Of course, I have to write down what that frequency is because it's number 4 on this system. But I was able to get on that, and then talk to somebody at least. And then my friend Richard, that's I think in Fuquay, he's Richard Futrell, you know him.
Yep.
And he's looking into getting a base to see if we can talk. So I'll probably have a base station here as well. So we'll get the offline advice of the base station. I think it's fun to have the extra range and the frequency, but also I'm excited because people who just want one, at least in my area, the power goes out just good enough. You have a few family members nearby or going for a walk or something, you've got a tool there.
Yeah. Now, is your wife the least bit interested in playing on that radio?
She will tolerate it. She is got for GMU. So, and I just want to tell you, I studied my heart out for my technician license. I got it right around with Charles, and I got like 91. I think she read the back of the book, the questions the night before, and got a 97. So she's smarter than me. I did. You
overthought it. That's the problem.
I knew that already. No, she's smarter than me. And I did succeed in getting my extra, Gary, but I do think there was a guardian angel there. I'm not that smart. But
extra's hard. Technician license, ham license, not that hard, but you do have to learn some stuff.
Right.
But the extra license, that's hard.
Yeah, no, I was on failure number 2, and he said you can only miss so many, and you miss those. I went, oh well, I'll try. I'm going to do it 3 times. He goes, no, you actually passed.
I'm messing with you.
Yeah, glad I sacrificed the chickens when I did, and no, seriously, I'm grateful. And I love the hobby. I really enjoy the people, but also. I like Barbara. I do have a radio near her, so if something occurs, we've got a radio, and she knows.
Okay, so she's got a ham license. The GMRS is just kind of extraneous or extra.
Yeah, we might play when I go to Shelley Lake or something and walk there.
But for hams, even for hams who have family members, kids, spouse, that not that interested in a ham license, but would like something for when, either maybe they've got a little latent gene in them, that little, we can't explain why we like two-way radio.
No.
We just do, it's something
it's a genetic flaw, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah. And maybe they've got a little bit of that, but not quite enough to get a ham license out of. But so with a GMRS license, they can use the family license. But for hams, you'll hear some hams say, well, why would I want to get a GMRS license? I've already got ham radio, which is 1,000 times bigger.
Right.
My answer is I like radio.
Mm-hmm.
I like radio. I like broadcast radio. I like two-way radio. I like every radio service. I have a scanner in my car. I listen to as much as I can. I will transmit everywhere that the FCC allows me to. CB, FRS, GMRS, ham radio. I don't have a business license because they're expensive and complicated, and I have no need for one whatsoever. And at that, I could only talk to other people in my business because that's the way they're set up. So I don't need a business license, but if you're talking on the two-way radio in your business, I'm listening.
Right.
Yep. But for GMRS, it was a no-brainer. Once I discovered, when I lived up in Raleigh for last 30 years up in Raleigh, there was no GMRS repeaters.
Right.
Our friend Danny KD4RAA had one for a little while near the fairgrounds, I think, maybe the same tower, that he used with his family a little bit. And I was vaguely aware that existed, but then he took that down. And most of the time there was no GMRS repeater in the Raleigh area. But I put the 22 FRS channels in my ham radio to receive on and scan them just because I like listening to everything radio. And I would hear, first of all, those kids hollering. And I would hear the most common use was at a school where the teachers are lining the kids up to get picked up by their parents. So a parent will drive in, be the next in line. Who's your kid? My kid is Billy. Send Billy out. His parents here.
All right.
You hear that a lot on the FRS channels because they're cheap. The schools can afford them. You come up to a construction zone on a 2-lane road, and they got 1 lane closed, so they're flagging people through one way and then flagging them through the other way. And the two guys talking back and forth to tell you what the last car is. Often they will use FRS. I heard a lot of that on FRS. So I get on my FRS radio and say, the guy in the green Toyota RAV4 is a VIP. Let him through right away. Yeah, the one with all the antennas on it. No,
it's very important.
I never did that.
I know.
But I thought about it. Anyway, you can hear all that kind of stuff. And then I moved to Charlotte. And suddenly I was hearing on some of those FRS channels ham radio-like activity that was clearly more than a mile or two from where I was, and clearly on a repeater with a hang time and stuff. And so I checked things out a little bit more, and sure enough, there were a bunch of repeaters with a lot, pretty busy, well, one busy one and a few not very busy ones down here in Charlotte on GMRS. And I thought, oh, I need to check this out some more. I had thought, and I was wrong, I had thought that the GMRS rules did not allow you to talk to somebody else with a different GMRS license. I thought it was just your family, or maybe in an emergency or something, you could give somebody some travel directions, things like that. But no, the GMRS rules say, talk to anybody with a GMRS license or no license at all on FRS. Anything you want to talk about, no limit to the topics. You can do business. You can do anything you want and have a good time. That's not well understood among a lot of people in the GMRS world still who have been around for some time.
No, I'm excited about it. Well, I really appreciate this, and I'll put some links and references below as well. And I'm excited to make some new friends and connect to them. And
most of the friends you're going to make are people you've already talked to on the ham radio, because this is
the crossover.
I'd say more than half the people on the repeaters down here already have ham licenses, and a bunch of the folks that didn't are starting to get them because they say, "Oh, this radio thing, I like it. It's cool."
Absolutely. And I chatted with a Ray that I think he has one of the repeaters in this area. So I thought that'd be fun to do a show with him talking about what's involved in getting a repeater and getting it set up is another topic.
Yep. I know that we need to go. I want to mention one more thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the hams. And that is the question of, can I use my ham radio on GMRS? And for the most part, you won't be able to, because your ham radio is going to be restricted to transmitting only in the ham bands. Most of them will listen. Your VHF, UHF, dual band FM radios.
Mhm.
Most of them will be able to listen to the GMRS channels, but they won't transmit there. But the dirty little secret is that by removing one surface mount diode, those radios will transmit almost every place they can listen.
Mhm.
Is it legal? It's legal to do. It's legal to be able to transmit there. It's just not legal to actually transmit there. So you're not breaking any laws and pulling out that diode.
But you're breaking the laws by transmitting.
Because the radio is not certified for operation outside the ham band.
Yeah.
What are the chances are if you do it? What is the problem? What are the chances of getting caught? The chances of getting caught are as close to zero as you've got zeros to the right of the decimal point to measure. The FCC is not going after people who do that. What are some reasons to not do it? Well, first of all, these radios may not be spectrally pure enough so that you can end up transmitting on frequencies you're not intending to. All radios transmit on, first of all, the frequency you're supposed to be transmitting on. And then second, a bunch of other frequencies at the same time. What makes things work is that your signal on those other frequencies is very, very weak. Signal is strong on the channel that you're supposed to be transmitting on and very, very weak on these others. But if you go outside the design limits of the radio, maybe those what we call spurious signals get a little stronger. So you're taking your chance that when you transmit on a GMRS channel, something is leaking out of your radio, and the GMRS channels are surrounded by business and public safety radio channels. Public safety is police, fire, EMS. Interfere with one of those guys. And no, it won't be a matter of the FCC's not caring and not paying attention. They'll find you and they will cause you some pain. So you got to think about it hard. The second thing is if you're a ham and you really, 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 really know what you're doing, you can probably program your radio correctly to get on the frequency that you're supposed to, and maybe even find somebody with a device called a spectrum analyzer and see that it's clean and everything is copacetic, and then with a pretty clear conscience, other than knowing that technically you're in violation of the law, but you're never going to get caught. It's like going 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. No one's going to tap you for that, but they'll use that to tap you if you got a problem some other way. If you really, really know what you're doing, you can program your radios properly. You can probably get away with it. If you don't know what you're doing, it is really easy to program these radios wrong. And now, instead of putting out that weak little spurious signal that's just kind of, no, your full power transmitter is wham, right where it's not supposed to be, on the police department channel.
Right. Or
and once again,
emergency service or something. Yeah.
They're going to come find you. So
those are the things I think it's consider. Easier just to buy another radio, and then when you turn it on, that's what it's at.
As long as you don't ask me what I'm personally doing.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you may have noticed I have not shown you a GMRS radio.
That's right. Yeah.
All right.
Sounds good. Oh, well, this was excellent. Appreciate your time, and this was a lot of fun, and look forward to chatting with it. And it looks like they're connecting some of the repeaters together. Is that right? In this,
that is happening. Yeah, there is some diciness about linking GMRS repeaters. In the ham radio world, we have had something called a phone patch for a long time. Now, back in the 70s, before everybody and their mom had a cell phone, because there weren't any, we had a deal where we could connect our repeaters to the phone system, and we could punch, on the front of this radio, there's a bunch of buttons here. They'll send touch tones when you transmit. So we could connect these radios, these repeaters, to the phone system, punch a phone number in it, an access code, and then a phone number, and talk on the phone. We're on our ham radio walking down the street or driving down the road and talking on the phone. And again, back in the 60s, 70s, even pretty much through the 80s and early 90s, most people couldn't do that. And we could. We were cool. A lot of people got ham licenses so they could do that. There was some big restrictions. You couldn't use them for business. It was absolutely not private. Everybody was listening on your business. and you couldn't receive a call. You could only make an outgoing call.
Yeah.
So lots of restrictions, but it was pretty handy. But then the cell phones became ubiquitous. Everybody had one, and this auto patch thing for ham radio has evaporated.
Uh-huh.
Nobody uses that anymore. They put in some rules on GMRS that said, thou shalt not connect GMRS to the public switched telephone system.
Mhm.
That's the phones that we use every day. Can't connect it to that.
Mhm.
Some people have interpreted that to mean you can't link GMRS repeaters together. That's not true. The FCC is silent. Don't say you can't. If they don't say you can't, that kind of means you can link GMRS repeaters together. It's not something the FCC ever envisioned for GMRS, but so far they're not saying thou shalt not. And so there are networks. What's the connection between them? It's typically the internet. The internet is not a public switch telephone system. It's different. It's something else. So they're connected on the internet. The hams have plenty of other radio frequencies that they can connect repeaters, use to connect repeaters. So I've got a repeater in Charlotte. You got a repeater in Raleigh. We want to connect them. If we're up on tall enough towers, we can use a radio frequency to connect them, or we can use the internet. There's a lot of internet that's going on. GMRS doesn't have those other frequencies to play with. Pretty much all they get is the internet. You could get a private microwave link or something between them. It's going to be pretty expensive.
Yeah.
So they're using the internet.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's getting popular. There are some repeaters that have a Zello connection. If you're familiar with Zello,
what's that?
Zello is a walkie-talkie like accessory on a phone. So I'll bring up the Zello app on my phone, and so it looks like this. Got this great big button in the middle is the push to talk button. So it turns your phone into something more like a walkie-talkie, and you can use it to talk to other people that have the Zello app on their phone.
That's it. That's the app, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that's the app. You've got that on your phone?
I do.
If we figured out who you were and who I was, we could talk to each other.
Right. So are those now connecting to them?
A few repeaters have a Zello connection. Okay. Now, in order to use it, you still have to have your GMRS license.
Okay.
Because you're going to be turning on a transmitter. So they'll vet you and make sure you've got a GMRS license before they're allowed you to transmit using the Zello app. But that lets you talk through a GMRS repeater in Raleigh from anywhere in the world, literally, because it's the internet.
Oh, cool. Well, of course, I'll be signing up for that now to try it out.
Yeah.
Learning that's something I saw in the group. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah. So if you used Zello for anything else, it works pretty much the same way.
So are you going to set up a GMRS repeater on your house? Is that in the plan? It seems to be easier than a ham radio.
I live in a hole.
I see.
I'm in a real low spot here, so it would not really benefit me to put something on this house. Plus, I can't put an antenna outside because it's antenna restricted HOA.
Oh my God. How did you buy a house with that?
I did not. My wife did.
I see. I got you. And you decided to come along, right?
When we lived in Cary, we had the house on the hill. Yeah. It was up high. I didn't put up much in the way of antennas, but I had some. But when we moved down here, she did all the figuring out. And I said, it's pretty low. And I can't put up any antennas. And she said, is that going to be a big problem? And I said, I love you, dear.
That's it. So there's one in the attic at least.
So that's why there are 8 ham radio antennas on my car.
I see. Gotcha. That's
I want to play. I go drive around. I mean, this stuff, you're seeing a green screen background, but it's just a picture of something that's sitting over there with antennas in the attic. And so I can play, but I can't play very far. I'll go through the local repeaters.
Cool. Well, this was lots of fun. I think we covered a lot of topics that I wanted and eager to connect to more
Have we
people
gone as far
on
as you
it.
did with Greg Fishel? Did he talk longer?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that was a great interview.
I am
Looking
so
forward to
jealous of
more.
you.
Yeah, yes. No, I'm excited to but this might be something we'll get him on. I think he's busy. He's pretty busy now. You know, he's a one-man show offering his own weather. I'm loving it because it's like no hype and the same corny puns that he's known for as well. And
Where is he doing that? Has he got like a YouTube channel?
yeah, he has a YouTube channel and he has a Patreon, and for like $3 a month, you get so many broadcasts with no time restraint. I mean, he gets to the point, but there isn't a boss over him either saying this or can he act like it's going to snow if it's not or whatever they do now in the media.
For those of you outside the Raleigh metropolitan area, Greg Fishel was the weather guy on the big TV station in Raleigh for decades.
Yeah.
And then he's some personal issues and left.
Yeah.
He solved his personal issues. I know only the tiniest little bit about what they were, but I got a clue because I know people in the TV biz and people know. He's good to go and he's doing it on his own. And he's a really fun guy to watch. Now, I've only talked to him that one time, the same ham radio club where you met him the first time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That he says is so distant in the past, he barely remembers. It was back in the 90s. But, that's the only time I met him in person, but he's a great guy.
Yeah, he is. And I'm excited to be helping him build out his business and just, moving from that corporate world into independent, which you've done as well. And it's a transition I love helping people with.
Since you're on the ham radio now live stream,
yeah,
which at this point has probably got 3 people still watching.
Yeah.
Tell people where they can find you and what you do, because this isn't, this ham radio stuff is your hobby. It's not your business.
Yes. Well, first of all, I have a channel. You can look up KI4CFS on YouTube. That's my volunteer give back, promote the ham radio. And that's where this recording will go, my version of the recording for the future. And then personally, I'm a business and success coach and really
I should have asked you a long time ago. I've had no success in business.
Well, I'm really good, but how to help businesses have a fierce competitive advantage on the ground and on the web. But I really love things like what Greg's doing, where he's moved from the corporate world into being independent and building up. He has, I guess, about 750 patrons, $3 to $5 a month and building. So, that's one of my greatest joys because I wake up every day unemployed because I'm generating employees, I'm generating work, and it's an exciting world, and I love to be part of it and help people be part of it because it gives you a real sense of autonomy. But like I say, only work 8 days a week, and then I take a day off. Yeah. But that's it. But
interesting when you say that you wake up in the morning unemployed, because I would freelance since 2000. I was freelancing until I retired, and at the end of any job, it may last longer than a day, but after a few days or a week or so, finished that job for a client, and I was out of work again until they called the next time, and when they call the next time, that feels awfully good. Well, they know who you are and what you can do.
Yes,
and
Gary, I have a book coming out on that to make it less of a problem. But I really wanted to, when I got back in the hobby, and the brief story is, my parents got sick. I'm the only child, and I spent years. In fact, I set up a group that I abandoned, and you rightfully reprimanded me for it. But they were in the hospital and out, and I was fighting to keep them alive. And then when they passed on, I love the hobby. And Paul Apolloni, a friend that's also a ham, we were going up to handle things with my parents, and he was helping me, and we stopped at HRO, and I bought a little handheld icon. I think it's the 52A or something. And then I went, it's like I fell in love with it again and the people from being away from it. And I I know marketing, so I set up a channel that has about 1,000 followers, and I said, "This is my community service act, helping grow and educate people in the joy of being part of ham radio."
Yeah. So you're probably responsible for bringing in a few dozen, maybe more.
I hope so, and I hope to keep doing it. And there are so many great people in it. I love my wife. Got into it when we were dating, and I really felt if there was an emergency, I'd feel a lot safer talking to someone ham radio than on this thing. And I still believe that.
Yeah, because the ham radio is likely to keep on working when the cell phone
all else fails. Yep. Yeah. Well, this was a blast. Thanks, Gary. And we'll have this online. And thanks for anyone who's been live listening to us.
Yeah, I haven't been watching my YouTube to see who's out there. But yeah, normally at this time of night, we'd be doing a Ham Radio Now live show. And my co-host is out in Los Angeles, currently being flooded. So we did a show earlier today where it was set up for a rerun. So this is just a little extra for the Ham Radio Now audience and for your audience. And thank you for inviting me on. I'm glad to share what almost everything I said was right, but you can never tell.
That's right. Sounds good. Excellent. So I'll sign as KI4CFS and now WRYG810 until I remember it. They thought of my radio.
K4AAQ, WRPG, that's rocket propelled grenade. That's the only way I can remember it. 652.
Sounds great. Thanks.
And you know how I end my shows?
Yeah.
Some bad radio procedure.
Yeah.
Let's see if you can get it. And it'll help me end this ham radio now.
Okay, good.
Over and
out.
That's it.
All right.
That's bad radio procedure.
Great. Take care.
Yeah, Mark. Thanks.
Bye.